are we? We are the Philippine Retailers Association, the pulse and voice of Philippine retail, recognized as a national organization of retailers and suppliers in the country. The PRA membership represents nearly 80% of the retail industry, which counts all major players like SM, Robinsons, Ayala Malls, Rustan's, Araneta Center, Bench, Mercury Drug, Penshoppe, Wilcon Depot, and more. So why join PRA? It is our goal to get your business in the right track, and to make this possible, the PRA offers exclusive privileges that will surely add value to your membership. PRA members in good standing can enjoy exclusive discounts for their music licensing under PhilSCAP, which is required by the law in compliance with the Intellectual Property Code of the Philippines. As the pulse and voice of retail, we represent your interests on issues confronting the industry, such as bills on the further liberalization of the retail trade, music copyright issue, contractualization, use of thermal POS printers, price tag law, among others. As a member, you can take advantage of special rates and discounts for various educational programs and projects we regularly conduct to help you advance and develop your skills and competencies and help your business grow. There are seminars, conferences, and expos, high-level and exclusive meetings, which will give you infinite opportunities for the growth and development of your business. As part of our commitment to also help retailers in the regions have access to our educational programs, we conduct regional roadshows all over the country. The PRA also conducts a 2-day career expo, which seeks to generate continuous source of qualified candidates for various levels and positions in the retail business. It is strategically held in malls to help generate increased foot traffic and correspondingly help increase sales for the retailers. PRA members enjoy exclusive privileges through the PRA BizCard, a unique program which offers members exclusive discounts, special offers, and other offerings from associate members and other suppliers. At the same time, it also allows a business-to-business transaction between regular and associate members, which is mutually beneficial for both parties, where trust and loyalty can be established. And since we want to add more value to your membership, we are offering the PRA Premier Members Card, a rewards program to serve and incentivize all members who are actively participating in PRA events and programs. We encourage and recognize Filipino retailers who have epitomized the model of success in terms of growth and good ethical best practices through the Outstanding Filipino Retailers and Shopping Center of the Year Awards, or OFRC. To support members in their employee recognition programs, the PRA spearheaded the Retail Employees Day program for the Philippines, which is celebrated every December 12. With the support of all members of the PRA, we recognize and celebrate retail employees for their role in the retail business. You have exclusive access to information and publications for industry development available in the PRA library. Through your membership in the PRA, we can help grow your network and access to local international networks through our affiliations with large influential business organizations locally and globally, like the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the Employers Confederation of the Philippines, the Federation of Asia-Pacific Retailers Association, the Federation of International Retail Associations, and the National Retail Federation, the world's largest retail organization. Such networks provide unlimited benefits of being connected to the local and global world of business and retail. So, who can be a member? All retailers in all formats, shopping centers, as well as suppliers of products and services to the retail industry are encouraged to join and be a part of the PRA community. How to become a PRA member? We have 3 types of membership to cater to your needs. There's a regular membership for those who are directly involved in the retail business. Associate membership for corporations or entities engaged in the business of supplying products or services to retailers. And chapter members who are any organized group of retailers doing business in the Philippines. Being a member of the PRA will give your company endless possibilities and opportunities to give your company what it needs to grow, expand, prosper, and become globally competitive. Because at PRA, our only business is helping your business grow.
Good day and mabuhay to all our retailers and allied industries. This is Raf Layosa of RetailGate, and welcome to another episode of PRA's Let's Talk Retail. As we look into millennial leadership in retail with our guest, who is from one of the most reputable fashion brands in the Philippines, to share his experiences as a second generation leader and his vision for the company moving forward. But before we head to our conversation with him, we would like to remind everyone that all podcast episodes are available on demand through the PRA YouTube channel. Simply check out the Let's Talk Retail playlist to watch the episodes whenever or wherever you want. Don't forget to click the bell icon to subscribe and get notified about future conversations on Let's Talk Retail. Now, to proceed to our main agenda, I'm very pleased to introduce to you Golden ABC's e-commerce and business transformation manager who oversees the end-to-end value chain for the e-commerce business, from supply chain management, sales and marketing to operations and fulfillment. He is also involved with the team that is building up GABC's exciting next phase through strategic and transformative projects aimed at revolutionizing the way the company works and creates relevance to their customers. From the get go, his career began in the digital world as he built his expertise in social media, digital strategy, and e commerce over the years. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bryan Liu. Hi, Bryan.
Hi, Raf. Morning.
Hey, morning. How are you, Bryan?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And this is very exciting. I'd really love to really learn about your story, right? So with GABC, right, being if not the leader in fashion, right, here in the Philippines, what's the story there? We'd just like to really understand and hear from you as the second generation leader in the company. What's the story of GABC from the start to its growth to becoming where it is today?
Sure. So I don't know if all of you know, but GABC started in Cebu. So the business really started in Cebu. Um, it started with dad. So my dad, Mr. Bernie Liu, is our CEO, founder and CEO. It started as a side project during his college days. So again, I don't know if how many of you know that dad is a licensed architect. So he's an architect by profession, but he became an entrepreneur. So what started as a side business with friends to design T-shirts, eventually when put together with a garment manufacturing factory that the family inherited. So putting those two together eventually gave birth to Golden ABC and our brands like Penshoppe. So that's how it started as a college business. Eventually turned into a livelihood for dad.
That's amazing. I mean, very interesting. You mentioned that it started as a college project from printing T-shirts or making designs. I mean, I'm sure we've heard a lot of people trying that out at college, right? But what really did it for your dad that really got him to decide to like this is something that we can really grow and really make into a big business for the country?
Sure. I think it was a lot of things put together. One was definitely that my dad has always been more of a creative. He's always wanted to build. That's I think one of the reasons why he started out being an architect. He wanted to build things. And when he saw the success of that small business on the side of t-shirt designing, and when he saw the opportunity of us eventually running and owning our own garment manufacturing factory in Cebu, I think that's when he saw the opportunity to put two and two together, and he saw if we can do this ourselves, and if we can continue to building our own, designing our own T-shirts, and eventually selling them ourselves. I think that's what started his journey with retail and eventually brand building. That's what he always calls himself. He's not necessarily an architect, or he's not just a designer, a T-shirt clothing designer. He wants to be a brand builder. He's always
Mm,
wanted to become a brand builder. So that's how it started. Eventually, he started his journey with retail. One thing led to another, and more of our brands came, and that's
mm.
it. That's how JBC started. That's how we grew into who we are today.
Now, fast forward to the company today, right? Would you tell us more about that purpose statement of yours, which is really fashioning experiences that inspire greatness, right? So, what's the inspiration behind that, and what does that mean for you and your team and everyone in GABC?
Sure. I think how that came along. So we call that our purpose statement. We
Mm,
fashion experiences that inspire greatness, and I think that came about when we realized that, like any company, you have your mission and vision, right? What you
yeah.
want to become and how you do it. So our mission is to become the most admired, to become one of the most admired Asian fashion brands company. That's our vision, and our mission was through our world statement: winning culture, operational excellence, responsive stewardship, leading brands and dynamic talent. So that's how we do it. And we realized that, okay, we don't have a statement of why we do things. Why are we doing what we're doing? Why do we want to work hard?
Mm,
So that's when we realized, okay, let's come up with our our purpose statement. And that's when we got together with basically almost the entire company. We had multiple sessions where we got the feedback and thoughts of almost every employee in the
mm,
company to say, what do you think? Why do you think you're doing what you're doing? Why do you get up every day? Why do you work hard? And over the course of a semi-long project effort with our teams, we came up with that statement. So we decided that we get up every day and we do what we do because we want to fashion experiences that inspire greatness. And that's the source of where all of this started and where that statement came from.
that's really amazing. That story you mentioned, that you actually got feedback from almost everyone in the company. And I believe that really is what's said to be the best way to approach that. And considering how large your company is and how many people you already have in the whole company, right? What did that mean for your employees when you got them involved to really shaping that purpose statement of the company, and how does that drive them today?
Sure. I think one of the reasons why we wanted to do it, have a grassroots approach to building this statement, is we believe that in order for us to have an accurate and a strong purpose statement, it needed to come from the employees themselves. It
Mm-hmm.
couldn't be driven from top down where we just tell everyone, okay, this is why you do what you do. We wanted it to come from everybody in the company and build it bottom up. Um, so we'd like to believe that it means a lot to the employees that, hey, I was a part of that and I know I can relate to that statement because that came from me. So that was also our goal. We wanted everyone to feel connected to that statement and have some investment to it, and not just something that you see on plastered on your wall and say this is why we do what we do, but really something that they know came from them also.
Yeah, that is amazing. And I really believe that's really how you empower your employees. It really starts from there, getting them involved. That's really amazing. Now let's look about since we were here to really talk about millennial leadership in
Sure.
retail, right? So for you, Brian, when did you start in the company? When did you start getting involved in the family business?
Sure. So officially, I started in 2014, last 2014. That was after I graduated college and after I had a short job here in Manila. That's officially. So my official start date is 2014. But unofficially, I've always grown up with a family business.
Mm-hmm.
Ever since we were kids, we would spend a lot of time in the office, and even our office in Cebu. We'd be going there during weekdays after school. We'd spend summers there with mom and dad. We'd be involved in quite a bit of a few projects. So back when we used to have Penshoppe kids, it used to be us kids who used to be the fitters and the people they'd measure, the kids they'd measure. So we've always been involved. We've always spent our childhood and until late into our teens growing up knowing what the family business is. So we've always grown up with a family business. But officially, I started in 2014.
Wow. And you mentioned that you actually did a short stint before joining the company. Would you mind telling us about that? What was that like?
Sure. So after college, I think this is a family rule we have that right after college, it's not advised that you jump straight into the family business.
Hmm.
Get some experience, get some work experience out there, make your mistakes out there before you start to join. Because I think we were made to understand that once you join the family business, there's a certain level of expectations, and it's kind of like a one-way ticket. Once you join, you're in it. You're in it for life.
Yeah.
But so that was what we did. Right after I graduated, I found a marketing job here in Manila. So I was in that company for about six months,
Hmm.
just to get working, just to understand what it's like to be working in an office environment, in a corporate environment. And after that 6 months period, I kind of realized like I can't wait to join the family business. I mean, none of this makes sense because I want to work, but I want to work eventually for the family business. So after about 6 months, we decided, okay, let's jump into the family business already.
So with that 6 months of essentially getting your feet wet, right? What were the valuable skills or learnings or insights that you picked up from that experience that you still carry with you right now?
Definitely how it's like to work in an office setting. That was
Mm-hmm.
one of the biggest, I think, learnings for anyone new into the workforce. Like you're coming into an office, you're given a table, you're given you're given a workspace, you're given deadlines, you're given reports. I definitely think that being able to go through that 6 month period was immensely useful for me before I started, because the moment I started in the family business, I was a bit
Mm-hmm.
more comfortable with knowing, okay, how office settings work, how different, how setting meetings work, how setting schedules work, so things like that. It was definitely the basics. I got to learn more of the basics before I jumped into the family business.
Mm. So, um, what was that like? The transition from before joining, actually, even before graduating from college, right? That you were already partially involved with some projects, being part of the being part of the family, right? And then transitioning to a full time position as you joined the company. What was that like, and what were the key challenges that you faced?
Sure. It was. I'd like to say it was a bit smooth. It was fairly smooth.
Mm,
We grew up knowing that the family business was there, and the invite to join the family business was always there for us. We were never forced. I just want to make that clear. We were never forced to join the family business. Our parents always made it clear that you do what you want to do, and if it so happens to be in the family business, you're more than welcome to join. So we had that in our heads even before we graduated college, that joining the family business was an option. And I'd like to say it was smooth, because as soon as I graduated college, I knew I eventually wanted to join the family business, and ever since I graduated, things were slowly prepared. We knew the people in the company, we knew how things were done in the company. People, key leaders, and executives in the company were slowly told, our kids will be joining soon, the next generation will be joining soon, so they were preparing for that also. So I'd like to say it was fairly smooth. It was a fairly smooth transition, just to go from knowing about the family business to eventually joining the family business. I'd like to
mhm.
say it was pretty smooth.
Yeah, and very curious about what you just said now. So you said it's pretty smooth. What made it very smooth for you? Like, what made it easy for you to decide that yes, I want to join the family business? And it didn't take you a year, just 6 months, and then you already joined after
Yeah,
college, right? So what really inspired you there to really decide fully that you wanted to be part of it?
sure. So growing up, I mentioned that we grew up with the family business, right? And
Mm-mm,
we always saw the family business as something that mom and dad did for work.
mm-mm,
Growing up, we never really understood what work is. I mean, as a teenager going to your older years, you never understood what work is, because you're at school, you're doing your own thing. So we were always curious, why does mom and dad spend so much time in Manila? Why do they work so hard? Why do they spend late nights working on projects and flying out to different places to open stores? So we were always curious, especially I was, because I'm the eldest in the family, so I'm, I was more curious because I was older. Um, so growing up, eventually graduating from college, carrying all these learnings, I took up marketing in college, so I had a business background. So carrying all these learnings eventually and applying them to my first job in the first 6 months, and going through those challenges and those hardships made me appreciate more and more why the family business existed and why mom and dad did what they did. So eventually putting all of those together just made me realize, like, growing up with the family business, being where we are now because of the family business, it also made me realize it's time for me to also give back and to do my share with
mm-mm,
managing the family business. So it was a very easy decision for me to eventually join and to make that decision. Yes, I do want to join a family business, and that's why I also say it's smooth, because again, I grew up with it, and that decision
mm-mm.
was made over time. It wasn't just a sudden thing, like, okay, one day I woke up and I wanted to join the family business. It was a gradual decision over time. It was an easy one to make.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, thinking about that time when you already joined, what was your immediate key role as you joined the company?
So I mentioned I took up marketing. I mean, that's
Mm-mm,
always something that interested me, the whole creative side of business.
mm-mm,
So once I graduated, I had a major in marketing, especially digital marketing. I joined as a part of the social media team back in
Mm,
2014, and the digital
mm,
marketing team. And that was the day, that was the time when social media was still something new that brands had to take advantage of and really grow into. So I started out in the social media digital marketing team, where I eventually learned the basics of, again, working in a fashion industry, built my skills on the marketing, especially the digital side. So I started there, growing our social media team, and eventually grew more and more into social media, understood more about social media and digital marketing. That eventually led to more digital initiatives, and that eventually led to where I am now, and that's in e-commerce.
mm. Now, you mentioned when you started, whole social media marketing, digital marketing was still fairly new, right? So, what were the challenges that you faced coming in fresh into the company, and then you're also handling something that's relatively new also for the company? What was that like?
Definitely very, very challenging. I was making my mistakes while trying to push for something upcoming for the company. So again, social media back then was still something brands had to understand and
Mm-mm,
eventually go into and make part of their. I think my one of my biggest learnings back then was social media back then was seen as um, uh, the more progressive type of marketing, the type of creative type of marketing, the unconventional type of marketing, and that was my challenge, where I had to basically make a case for social media and why we had to grow social media while learning how to work in a corporate setting in an office environment at the same time. So it was
mm-mm,
definitely challenging. I had to do a lot of pitching. I had to do a lot of pitching that to our leaders, to my parents on why we should be investing on social media. That was probably my biggest challenge, spending more time trying to pitch for the idea of social media back then.
yes. You mentioned it's really unconventional, right? So that challenge of having to pitch and really sell those ideas. How did you navigate through that environment? Given that it's fairly new, very unconventional, and you had to come in there as a new person in the company and very young with fresh new ideas. How did you navigate through that?
So the training I got back in university was definitely helpful. Marketing back then was we had a lot of classes and a lot of sessions where we essentially had to pitch at the end of the semester. So a
Yeah.
lot of experience coming from and a lot of training coming from university was definitely helpful. I'm very, very fortunate that I also get a lot of mentorship from dad and mom themselves. So I remember I had experiences where I would be pitching something that made no sense in the start. I mean, you pitch something and it had no direction and no recommendations at the end, no business sense. And I was very fortunate that mom and dad gave me the feedback to improve, and they gave me
Mm-mm,
basically understandings of when you are pitching for something, make sure that you understand your audience, make sure you understand what your goal is, how to get there. Um, so that's how I eventually became better in pitching for social media. I got a lot of feedback, and I already had some existing training coming from school.
mm. And that's amazing. You mentioned that you actually had a strong foundation through the mentorship of your parents, right? So, what are the key principles that they've taught you that you are really espousing right now as you are also leading now your own team?
One definitely that sticks with me comes from dad. This is something that he constantly shares with us and practices himself. That's leading by example.
Mm,
So leading by example is like, in my definition, it's like the golden rule of leadership and management, um,
mm,
in a corporate setting where you lead by example. So the way I define it is you can't ask your team to do something that you yourself are not willing to do. So that's something that I have seen dad practice, where if he says, I want my team members, I want the company to be on time and to come to work on time, and he himself has to be able to show that kind of practice as well. And
mm,
so that's the kind of principle that we follow, that we can't ask or we can't demand from our people the same things that we ourselves are not willing to do. And I found that a very effective principle to apply basically in any field, in any corporate field, because it points to yourself as a leader first, that if you yourself as a leader are not willing to do something, you can't expect your team to do it too. So
mm,
that kind of sets the tone and sets the cap that you as a leader, you are the cap and you are the one setting the tone.
that's right. Now, as a leader now, when we going back to that purpose statement you have, which is fashioning experiences that inspire greatness. How do you espouse that and really ensure that your team, the people that you're leading now, are also you're able to fashion that experience that inspired greatness in them? How do you do that?
Interesting. Good question. I think the keyword there is experience.
Mm-hmm.
That's the specific keyword I want to use, and I'll link this up to one of our efforts recently of really strengthening the customer experience we hold in our company, and the kind of customer experience we want to offer to our customers. The way we see it, experience is not just something that you push externally. So experience is not just something that you build for your own customers to enjoy. But in order for your own employees to really understand what a good experience is and why they should be pushing for experience, internally in the company, we also spend a lot of time making sure that our own employee experience is also quite rich and quite engaging. We do a lot of employee engagement programs. We do a lot
Mm-hmm.
of activities that allow us to engage and show our employees that experience is something that you have to, well, from the word experience and try. And it's not just something that we have to give out to our customers, but internally we have to have a good experience as well. So that extends to how we behave in the workplace, how we behave and treat each other as colleagues and peers. So that's how we get them really to understand what experience is and what their role is in giving that good experience, not just to each other, but also to the customers.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I think that's a perfect picture of how taking care of your employees would really effectively create that experience that you would eventually give to your customers, right? Um, Now, in the fashioning that experience for your people, right? What are the values that actually define and shape the experiences of your people as you lead them each day?
So some of our values, I mentioned our world values earlier. So our winning culture, operational excellence, responsive stewardship, leading brands, and dynamic talents. So those are the values that allow us to understand how we're going to get to our goal. But we also have our corporate values:
Mm-hmm.
professionalism, integrity, spirit of enterprise, and service.
Mm-hmm.
These are some of the values that we've identified that are important to us as a corporation, as an organization, that we want to see in our employees. So
Mm-hmm.
professionalism is how we behave, how we conduct ourselves as professionals. Integrity is a big one. Integrity is how we behave. Simple definition is how we behave even when nobody's looking. Spirit of enterprise is how entrepreneurial you are. So how you can
Mm-hmm.
look for business opportunity, how resourceful you can be, and service is really that willingness to serve. At the end of the day, we're in a retail service industry where we serve our customers. So
Mm-hmm.
these four values have to be strongly integrated into our employees because these are the same values that will allow us to also, in our opinion, to reach our goals.
I love that note you mentioned about spirit of enterprise or making them more entrepreneurial. So how do you inspire that? I mean, I believe that's every business leader's dream to be able to inspire their people to treat the company as if they own the company as well. How do you inspire that among your people?
Interesting. We call that malasakit, diba? That's something
Yes.
that we all want to build with our own employees. That we all have to have that level of malasakit,
Mm-hmm.
and we do so by number one showing that whatever we do in the company affects each other. So
Mm-hmm.
we have that belief that however we behave, however well we do in the company, doesn't just benefit the owners of the company or the stakeholders, but literally everyone in the company. So we try to make that as visible as possible to everyone in the company, that whatever we
Mm-hmm.
do here in the office benefits the thousands of families that our sales staff and that our retail staff belong to. And the same thing also with the retail, the store staff, that whatever they do helps each other, helps the other stores, and helps their other colleagues. So that's one of the reasons why that's one of the ways that we show to our employees that the more entrepreneurial we are, the more creative you can be with your ideas. It will benefit everyone in the company and eventually everyone in society. That's something that
Mm-hmm.
we try to strive for. Something that has always taught myself, the family, and the company is um, you can only do good for the world if you yourself also in the company if you do well. So you can only do as much good as you do well in the company. So that's always
Yeah.
something that we try to understand. Okay, if you want to help the world become a better place, we need to make sure that we have to do our best also in the company so that we have the resources to help others.
That's amazing. That's very powerful. And how does that translate to the involvement of your people in the day to day activities, and really how do you see them becoming more entrepreneurial with their work?
Sure. So we've seen that come into effect through our different employee engagement programs I mentioned earlier. So we do have
Mm-hmm.
a lot of CSR activities through our Get Up program. So that's where we work with the likes of Gawat Kalinga and all these different organizations that help society building. And
Mm-hmm.
we've seen that through, we've seen the effect of this willingness to help and serve from our employees through the registrations that we get every time we launch
Mm-hmm.
something like this. Like we have a new program, a limited number of slots are available, and that those slots fill up like on the first hour that we release it, just because there's a lot of employees that want to join and participate in these type of things. So that's how we see that the willingness to serve and the understanding of doing their part is visible in our employees.
Oh, that's amazing. And I love what you mentioned about that, because it's really showing that they have that initiative, right? And how much value has that added to your business and to your day to day operations when there's really that natural initiative from your people?
I'd say priceless, to be honest. I
Yeah.
one of the hats I wear is a transformation hat, and
Mm-mm.
one of the challenges with transformation is really influencing change and drawing
Mm-mm.
out that change from your employees. There's this use case that I always like to go back to where it was an example of an airline that
Mm-mm.
saved a lot of money because one simple act from a janitor, the one who cleans the planes, of seeing wine bottles and saying, every time I clean up the plane, I always see the wine bottles half consumed. So why don't we make our wine bottles half the size, and that's the ones that we serve. And
Mm.
because of that, it allowed the airline to save a lot of money, just because they shrunk their wine bottles to how much people actually consume during flights. And it all came from a thought from someone. I mean, you would think that someone like a janitor is someone down the ranks in a corporate environment, in a company, but it all came from one person's thought that
Yeah.
found its way up. um, so that's something I think is priceless. If you have this level of initiative and this level of psychological safety in your company that allows employees, regardless of rank, regardless of position, to share their thoughts and bring it up to their boss and say, hey, I spotted this thing, it's an idea, would this work? I have to say that's definitely priceless, because there are countless ideas that are floating in our company that is just sitting in one of their employees' heads that could
Mm-mm.
have made a big difference in the company. But because if they have that initiative to share and they are allowed to share, that will really allow your company to really grow much more, rather than focusing it on just a few select individuals who think of all the ideas, but rather than the entire company as a whole.
Yeah, and I guess that's a real testimony to ideas can come from anywhere, right? Now, I'd love to highlight one thing you mentioned. It's that psychological safety to share these ideas. How do you operationalize that in the company?
Hmm. It's a very tricky thing. Interesting that you use the word operationalize, because psychological safety is a very soft, I'd like to say
Yeah,
soft thing, and operationalizing is a very sounds like a very
yeah.
technical thing. So psychological safety, I think, is a concept that we recently picked up and we've been trying to imbibe in our organization, and that really emanates from, I'd say, the way that our CEO, my dad,
Mm,
runs the company and treats his people. I think it's safe to say that dad is a very, I mean, tough and demanding boss, and that's always something that he knows. He says it's a good thing if you work for a tough boss. But I think the way that we try to manage that is, despite being a tough or demanding boss, you have to try and also support your team. So help your team grow. So don't just be demanding from them and saying, "You give this to me or else." But you
mm,
say, "I want this. I want to see this from you, and how can I help you? As your head and then as your leader, how can I help you become better as an employee, become better as a person?" And that kind of engagement, that kind of arrangement, really has come from the way Dad also runs the company. He's demanding and he's tough, but he also says, "Okay, what do you need? How can I help you to reach those goals?" And I think that's the one of the ways that we've really built this psychological safety in the organization. That hopefully that kind of behavior trickles down to the rest of our managers, to the rest of our heads, and that's how they treat their employees, and that's how they treat their teams.
wow, that is amazing. That really reminds me of a key concept in business school that I think this is one of the few stories that I've heard that's actually in reality testimony servant leadership in a corporate world, in a corporate setting. That's really amazing. Now, speaking of your dad, right? In terms of management style, how is your management style similar and different from that of your dad's?
To be honest, I'd like to say it's more similar than it is different.
Mm,
Similar, especially with the principles that I apply to managing the team. I think it's only natural, it's only expected because dad is my mentor when it comes to
mm,
business. So anything that I know of business today comes from my dad. So I'd like to say there's a lot more similarities than differences. I think the only difference is when is factoring in the modern generation. I am a millennial, and I'd like
mm,
to say that I think I'm on the older end of a millennial, but I'm already starting to see the Gen Zs coming into our workforce also. So I think the only difference with the management style of dad and myself is the principles are the same, but the way I communicate it and the way I relay it to my team might be different because of the generation.
mm.
So that's maybe the main difference. More similarities, but difference in the way I relay it and the way I apply it to my team.
Yeah. Now, as a millennial leader, now we hear, especially nowadays, especially in this season, right, that we have to be fast, right, and really react quickly. What does that mean for you and for the company right now?
Interesting you use that word fast, Raf, because
Yeah.
fast FAST is one of the guiding principles that we recently applied to the company. Even before the pandemic,
Mm-mm.
that we envision us these principles will allow us to catapult the company further. So FAST for GABC stands for frugality. So making
Mm-mm.
sure that you spend your resources wisely, being good stewards. A is agility, so making sure that you are as flexible and as agile as possible when it comes to making decisions. S is simplicity, so keeping
Mm-mm.
things simple. I think we all know that concept, just keeping things as simple as possible without overcomplicating things. And lastly, T is teamwork. So doing all of these first three things, but with a team. So
Mm-mm.
it's very timely that you use that word. So how do you move fast? Because we also practice those principles, moving fast.
Mm-mm.
Um, yeah.
Now, when one of the things there you mentioned is really agility. Now, what does it mean to be agile for your company?
So agile. So we're in a fashion industry, and with fashion, a lot of trends come up. A lot
Mm-mm.
of I think that's the main way to explain the fashion industry. Is it's a very trendy industry. Um,
Mm-mm.
so agility for us means ability for us to hop on those trends as fast as
Mm.
possible and as quick as possible to be able to serve it to our customers and to be able to relate faster to our customers. So that's how we've
Mm-mm.
been trying to build the organization, being more agile. So being able to make smaller and quicker decisions to pivot around different paths rather than long-term decisions that won't allow us to change direction if ever. So that's how we
Mm-mm.
practice agility. So really making those smaller, quicker decisions rather than those long-term big ones.
That reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from your dad, Sir Bernie Liu. I remember it just at the height of ECQ. He said, this was posted by PRA actually. He said, "Now is the time for companies to think like a startup." And coming from a startup, I was amazed when I saw that. Like, wow, that is really inspiring, right? So, what does that mean for you guys? What does it mean to really think like a startup, and how did that help you, especially in times where you need to act fast, act quick, and be agile with the trends?
Sure. I think one of the key things about being a startup versus being a firm like ours, who's more established, a more long-term firm, is I've always loved that startup culture where
Mm-mm,
everybody in a startup has to be willing to do anything that needs to be done. So
mm-mm,
internally, we call this instead of being specialists, we have to be generalists. So
mm-mm,
previously, in the pandemic, before the pandemic started, when we were all focused on this is what I do and this is the only thing that I do, we had to break that and say you have to be willing to do anything it needs to be done in the company in order to help the company. And I think that's one of the main things that we took away from that acting like a startup principle, where you need to be able to understand that especially in this pandemic setting, we all need to be generalists and we all need to do what we need to do in the company, even if it's not in your job description, even if it's not your technical role. You have to be willing to help the company in any way you could. And we practice this, especially if I wear my e-commerce hat. Back when we experienced the growth, the sudden surge in online sales, there were a few people in the company we had to pull in from different areas, different groups in order to help the online business, and they had no e-commerce experience whatsoever.
Mm-mm.
And that was the way we embodied really being generalists, where we would have maybe technical people, creative people now working in a manual setting because we had to keep up with fulfillment. So this is one of the ways that we really trying to practice that
Mm-mm.
behave like a startup mentality.
Yeah. Now, from that transition from being a specialist to a generalist, what were the challenges that you saw in that transition? And in the spirit of what your dad would always say, right? To you have to do this, but tell me how I can help you. How did you help your people through that transition?
Sure. So one of the challenges was definitely as the need for people to cross paths and as the need for people to become generalists grew.
Mm,
Um, well, firstly, we definitely saw some people who were not able to cope with change. That's where we saw that the type of leadership you apply to these type of people or to your teams in general really spelled how much of generalists they could be.
mm-mm,
Um, because I think one of the roles of a leader is also to help the person succeed and not
mm-mm,
just put them into a role where they will fail. So the way that we managed our teams and our own leaders also in allowing them to understand that it's not just a matter of again saying you must now be generalists, but you have to equip them with the right training, with the right type of background, with the right type of mindset setting, and even with the right type of coaching in order to get them suited into the role. That was probably our biggest challenge with this whole specialist to generalist thing, where we
mm-mm,
had to cater the tools for the individual and say, okay, this person is moving into e-commerce with no e-commerce experience. How can we help them understand? How can we help them? How can we equip them with the right tools and with the right mindsets and principles to allow them to succeed in that position?
mm-mm. Now, given that you mentioned this came about and was more highlighted this year, especially when the pandemic hit. How did you manage that, especially in that time when we were all on lockdown, when ECQ kicked in, and people were forced to just stay at home? How did you make sure and again operationalize that to empower your people despite those limitations that we had to navigate through?
Sure. I think that's always been pre-pandemic or not. That's always been our style, especially my style. We've never
Mm-mm,
liked to micromanage. We've always allowed, and I think the keyword here is empowering. We've always wanted to empower our people. GBC, despite being a family-owned business and a family business, it's a very professionally run business. So we have professional managers, we have professional executives that run the company with us. So that goal of always empowering our people, our teams, has always been there. Um, the need for that grew, especially during this pandemic. We needed to empower our
mm-mm,
people more to make decisions, especially now that we're all working from home. So that culture, that empowering culture, has always been in GABC. Just something that was magnified a bit more this pandemic. So I'd like to say it was definitely a challenge, but it wasn't that big of a challenge because we knew what empowering meant and we knew what that meant in terms of managing our teams.
mm-mm. And with that scenario that we're all in right now, now we've heard from other leaders that it actually forced digital transformation, right? That COVID-19 was the one that accelerated digital transformation. But when we think of that, it actually entails a paradigm shift in mindset, right? So how did you manage that from the mindset from largely operations being more in the brick and mortar? Now we're seeing more shifts towards e-commerce. How did you manage that change and that shift or that paradigm shift in mindset?
Sure. So I think you used the right word, Raf. The pandemic, if anything, didn't wasn't the start for us in terms of shifting our perspectives and shifting our priorities. We
Mm,
knew e-commerce is becoming a big thing. Even back a year, 2 years ago, we knew that this was going to be a business model that we had to learn and create. But you use the right word. The pandemic accelerated things. That's the key word.
mm,
Just it's accelerated by a lot.
yeah.
The need to shift to this kind of business model. And to be honest, the most morbid way of us seeing the need to shift happened when the ECQ was applied last March to April, when literally
Mm,
all the malls, everything was closed, and your revenue is basically zero if you're an offline only company. And
Mm-mm.
that's how it was spelled out to us. If we did not strengthen our online business, and at a time like that when all your stores, all your offline stores are closed, you're dead in the water.
Yeah.
So that's where we saw that basically if we understood if we did not speed up and strengthen our online business, we would be caught in this position where because of this pandemic, we would have minimal to no revenue at all. And that's what basically spelled it out for us. Okay, we need to spend more time investing and building for this e-commerce business.
Mm-mm. Now you mentioned about that time, right? When stores were forced to be closed, and it essentially would spell out into zero revenue if you're purely offline. And understandably so, we've heard a lot of that time, even until now, that being locked up at home and with the pandemic right in our faces, right? There's a lot of fear and anxiety that would tend to set in. How did you manage that in your people and bring back that sense of hope to make sure that they won't be, for lack of a better term, right, consumed by that fear and anxiety?
You're right, Raf. There was a very high level of fear and anxiety, not even just at the company level, but even at a family level. Back when
Mm,
ECQ
mm-mm,
started, back when this whole thing started, a lot of us didn't know what was going to happen and didn't know what was next, didn't
mm-mm,
know how long this would be. But in the company, I'd like to say that one of the ways we were able to keep and manage everyone's hopes is also the way that Dad has been able to, our CEO, has been able to manage the communications to the rest of the company ever since the start. I remember the right after the ECQ was announced. I think it was March 17. That was the date it started. I remember back then when everybody was stuck at home and everybody was at a standstill saying what's next. Dad was already working with me to understand, okay, how do we communicate to the entire employee base of GBC? And that's when we worked on a virtual live stream setup at home where I had to set up a computer, and we use this workplace we use this platform called Workplace by Facebook, and that's
mm-mm,
our communications platform across the entire organization. So I remember in the first week, Dad and I had to work together to set up a live streaming session at home where he could address all the employees and basically just reassure them that yes, this is something we are going through. Yes, this is something that this is new. This is new to Golden ABC as well. But he was also sharing that Golden ABC has gone through hardships in the past and we've made it through. So he was very reassuring. And I think the key here is Dad focused a lot on communication. So he never shut out the entire company. He always made sure that they knew what was happening, they knew what to do, they knew what was next. And that has allowed us, I think, to transition more from the fear and anxiety to be more reassured. Okay, that we don't know what's coming, but we know that we are ready and we know that we are going through this together. So I think the key here is communication and how Dad managed to communicate with the rest of the company since the start of the pandemic.
that's amazing. And that's really a fundamental thing, like you mentioned. It's really down to the communication and transparency, right? Now, thinking about communication as a millennial leader, how is that? How do you add your own take on communication as a leader, as a millennial leader?
Sure. So I think one of the key differences with how communication has evolved from the previous generations of my
Mm-hmm,
dad down to myself as a millennial, down to Gen Z as a newer generation coming to the work stream. Um, I think communication has changed greatly in terms of how we communicate.
mm-hmm,
Back then, when in my dad's time, a conversation had to happen over the phone. You had to pick up the phone and call someone. You had to talk to them either even face to face to have a conversation. And for millennials, virtual conversations have started to happen a lot more. We'd be okay with chatting more than
mm-hmm,
picking up the phone. And I think that's even spelled out more with Gen Z, where conversations with them we're not just okay to even have virtually, but we're preferred to have virtually.
mm-hmm,
And through very different forms of communication as well, virtually you have things like memes, GIFs, emojis, and those type of things to
mm-hmm,
express your point. So I think the content of the communication is the same.
mm-hmm,
It's the same type of messaging you hand off regardless of generation. It's just the form of messaging that changes. What used to be done over voice is now done over chat or video call and now done through to not just necessarily text anymore, but to GIFs and emojis and
Yeah.
different types of formats. So I think that's how, as a millennial leader, I have to adapt. I have to understand these new forms of communication that will allow me to connect better to the
Mm-mm.
younger millennials or to the Gen Z generation, where they would be able to latch on to these type of different communication styles more than just a simple phone call. So I think
Mm-mm.
that's the main difference with the way I communicate versus the way maybe my dad's generation communicates.
Yeah, I love what you mentioned. It's really about connecting, right? So, in terms of connecting now, we're seeing a lot of changes now in the industry. You mentioned communication itself has already really evolved more than just text. We're also seeing emojis, and now even the market itself is going digital, right? So, with that, are you seeing? How do you see the future of shopping here in the Philippines? Are you seeing the trend or the market going more fully e-commerce, or what's going to be the state of the brick and mortar? What's your forecast for that?
Sure. So I've always, back when I started in e-commerce, especially when I was still learning about the business as a whole, I believed back then that e-commerce was the future and e-commerce was the only way to go.
Mm-mm.
That was something that was, I think, a naive expectation back then. But now, today, I firmly believe that e-commerce will not be something that will be the only way of shopping moving forward. There is going to be an online and offline relationship, regardless of how much into the future we are. It's always going to be that O2O, on online to offline, offline to online relationship that I think will be the future of shopping. It will never be a purely online or a purely offline setting. It will be a mix of both.
Mm-mm. Now, when we think of going online, or the digital market, as they say, right? We've always heard that there's that importance of big data and analytics. Now, what's the role of big data and analytics for your strategies, and how has it proven essential or strategic for your decisions as you're managing, and especially now you mentioned online to offline or offline to online. What's the role of data and analytics there?
A very key role, Raf.
Mm,
One of the ways I'd like explaining the difference between online business and offline business is offline, what you wouldn't be able to collect offline, things like what people are looking at, things like how long people are spending in your stores, how many
mm,
people are visiting your stores, are things that you can capture easily and automatically online. And you
mm,
can literally capture all the data you want online, from the number of clicks, from the number of views, from how long they spent on a particular page or your site. You can capture all of that. And from all of that data is where you can make really good and interesting business decisions and ask business questions. So I'd like to say that, to us, capturing all this data and using all this big data to point us to the right direction, or I like to call it the flashlight. It's your flashlight to where you should be looking at.
mm,
That's a key role in terms of managing our online business, because all these decisions we make have to be data driven. And
mm,
online, you can get as much data as you want online. So that must be a key pillar in your online business. If you want to grow it, you have to be able to have that
mm.
strong data background and strong data driven decision making.
Yeah. Speaking of key pillars in managing the business and going data driven and managing the new direction towards online, what would you say would be the best practices that you've learned in navigating through managing e-commerce?
Sure. Interesting question, because I've learned, especially if I wear my e-commerce and transformation hat, I've come to believe that while best practices are good, and while it is ideal to look for best practices and to apply best practices, I've learned that experimentation trumps best practice, especially in
Mm,
an e-commerce field where best practice can change literally day by day. So
mm,
that's something that I think might be a key learning for me, especially in the e-commerce field, where I would rather experiment and look for new ways of doing things than look for and stick to a best practice. Because again, best practice will change, especially for a field like e-commerce, where best practice in an offline setting, in a more traditional legacy setting, might be more stable. But for e-commerce, I think experimentation is better than best practice.
Wow, that's amazing. A very unique answer. I think that might have been the first time I heard that the best practice is actually experimentation. And I do believe it's because there's no such thing, especially in e-commerce, where a one size fits all, right? And I guess that's the power of e-commerce, where you can also enable customization and personalization. That's amazing. Now, with the pandemic, now we're running in the pandemic for what, almost 9 months now, I think. What are the most significant lessons that you've picked up from this year?
Sure. So this pandemic really has brought out a lot of learnings, despite how challenging and despite how negative this pandemic has treated us. It's brought out how, in my opinion, how important and critical leaders really are for managing your organization, especially in this pandemic setting where everybody are working from home. You do not have an office setting that will allow you to create that sense of camaraderie and that sense of community easily. So I think the number one learning is really how leaders show up in this time of pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what I mean by when I say show up, it's not literally, of course, showing up. It's how you show up as a leader. So whether that means even showing your video during a call, how often you communicate during this pandemic with your team, how you can make sure that you send that message of um, cautious hope, and how do I say it, optimistic realism, that yes, we are going through this, and similar to what Dad did in the start of the pandemic and even today, that he has always given that sign of hope for the company and for our employees. So I think that that's the main takeaway, and that's the main thing that I'm going to be taking away from this pandemic, where this pandemic has really shown us how key leaders are in terms of managing your organization, your teams, and not just even at the corporate setting, at the national setting, at the world setting. That your leaders are going to be are key to being able to get through this kind of environment.
That's really amazing and very inspiring, Brian. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but this was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. But before we let you go, Brian, we just have one last question for you.
Sure, sure.
As we close, what would be your message to fellow retailers, especially your fellow millennial leaders in retail?
Sure. So to the retailers listening, I hope you're all well, and I hope you're all safe with your families. I think the main message I can give to the retailers is stay strong. It is a very difficult time, especially for us retailers. This is a given. This is not something that we can sugarcoat. We have to stay strong. We have to be able to make the hard decisions that we have to. We have to survive together as a retail industry. Our role as retailers here are not just to help ourselves, but to help each other. The retail industry will not survive if only a few people are left in it, because that's the entire retail industry is, everybody. So that's my main message: stay strong, continue to stay safe and survive, so that we can get through this together. And once everything bounces back, we can go back into success together also. And for
Thank you so.
the
Yeah, sorry.
millennial leaders,
Yeah.
for continue learning. You need to continue learning. Do not take the wealth of experience and wisdom of your predecessors,
Mm-hmm.
of your parents. Don't take it for granted, because they do carry with them a lot of learnings and a lot of experience, that we ourselves do not have. And I can tell you that I would not be where I am now without the guidance and mentorship of my own parents. So do not take that for granted, but um, do not also submit to their way of doing things. I urge you to continue to challenge the way that they are doing things, and your ideas. You have to continue to push for them also.
Mm. Thank you so much for that, Brian. That was really a very inspiring conversation, and we really learned a lot from you. I mean, in the spirit of what you just said, millennial to millennial, this is exactly an opportunity for me to learn from you as well. And I believe all our audience who are watching this episode have also learned so much from a millennial leader like you. Thank you so much, Brian, for your time. Thank you for joining us. This episode was definitely and without a doubt a very insightful one for all our audience, and we're so much better for it. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Raf. Thank you also to the PRA for having me. It's always a pleasure.
All right. Thank you so much to our viewers, of course. And again, this is Raf Layosa of Retail Gate. See you again on the next episode of PRA's Let's Talk Retail.